And in this katha, I will deal with gratitude, the symbology of the Shiva Lingam, and answer the question, who is more powerful, Shiva or Ram? In this 𝗟𝗢𝗣𝗅, Tulsidas writes,
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
परमाराम्य उत्तम 𝗟𝗢𝗥𝗗 महिमा अमित जाई नहीं बरनी। परमाराम्य उत्तम 𝗟𝗢𝗥𝗗 महिमा अमित जाई नहीं बरनी।
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
करियो इहा शंभु तापना मोरे हृदय परम कल्पना। करियो इहा शंभु तापना मोरे हृदय परम कल्पना।
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. 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 Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
Tulsidas says that the monkeys brought huge mountains which were handled like play balls by Null and Neel. And when the All-Merciful saw the bridge so beautifully constructed, he smiled and said, "Most charming and delightful is this spot, too immeasurably glorious to be described in words. Here I will set up an image of Shambhu. This is my form resolve." We might ask the question, why? Why God needs to incarnate as an avatar? Why does he need to take a human form when he is all-powerful? He can do anything. And here we see a beautiful reason why God takes form, to set an example to all of us. After this major project of building a bridge to Lanka was completed, the Lord said, "I must give thanks to my Lord Shiva, because it is by his grace that this bridge was completed." And we too, whenever we accomplish something significant or even not so significant, we must give thanks to God, because without God's power, it would not be possible. Some people work very, very hard and they don't get the desired outcome. Others work hard and they get the desired outcome. What's the difference? It is only when we realize it is God's power which is activating us, which is in all our actions, then most likely we will have the desired result. God comes to set an example to us how to behave. And so the Lord is saying through his action, whenever we accomplish something, we must give thanks. He must be grateful. A story is told of 10 lepers who were all healed by a great master. In those days, doctors couldn't cure leprosy. So these 10 lepers who were in company together, they saw this great master and they appealed to him. They said, "We know this disease has no cure, but with God, all things are possible. And we know that you are a great master in tune with God. Can you help us?" After the master left, they found to their great joy that they were all cured of this usually incurable disease. But you know what? Out of the 10, only one went in search of that master to say thank you. When he asked that one, "You have come to say thanks, what about the other 9? He said, "I don't know where they are." Bhasmasur, he prayed to Lord Shiva to be granted a boon. And when, after hard penance, he was granted the boon, what was the boon? That he wanted to have the power to, whenever he would place his hands on anyone's head, that person will be instantly reduced to ashes. That boon was granted. Sometimes we twist God's arm to get what we want. But you know what? As soon as Bhasmasur got that boon, he headed straight to Lord Shiva with upraised hands to place his hands on Lord Shiva's head. The one who gave him the boon, he wanted to use that boon against Lord Shiva. In the end, the very boon that he got destroyed him. There was a lady. She had a young son. He was not too bright, but he was about to write an important examination which would shape his life, his academic life. So she prayed to God that, "Lord, if my son passes this examination, I will give thanks to you in a tangible way. I will perform a yajna in praise of you, Lord." Her son somehow passed the examination with good grade, and he got a prestigious school. But when she remembered her words, her promise to God that she would do a yajna for him if her son passed, she said, "You know what? A yajna will cost a lot of money. And I'm not even sure that that was the reason why my son passed. I'm not sure it was God's help." And she never did the yajna. Narad was able to conquer Kamdev because he did sadhana at the spot where Lord Shiva meditated for eons. But rather than give praise and thanks to Lord Shiva for being able to conquer Kamdev, he thought to himself, "I'm so great. I'm like Lord Shiva. I too have conquered Kamdev." As a result of his ingratitude and his false pride, Narad was humiliated in public. On the other hand, we're told that in the Devi Mahatmya, Prince Sudarshan, he became king by the grace of Divine Mother. He never forgot the kindness of the Divine. He and his queen Shashikala worshipped Divine Mother daily and decreed that the 9 nights of Vasant Navaratri be reserved by all their people for her worship. So Lord Sri Ram says, at this spot, I will worship my Lord Shiva. And so, a Shiv Lingam was established. We all know what is the Shiv Lingam. We all worship the Shiv Lingam. When I was at Divyadham, I was horrified when some people gave an obscene interpretation to this Shiv Lingam. And when I did some research, I found that yes, many people felt the same way because they were misled by outsiders, non-Hindus, who would find every opportunity to ridicule Hindus and what they worship. What is the true meaning of the Shiv Lingam? The Shiv Lingam represents Sadashiv, the Supreme Lord, the formless Lord. The Lord is both formless and with form. We can think of the Shiv Lingam as being made up of infinite circles, an infinite number of circles. Just as a circle has no beginning or end, in the same way, the Lingam represents the Lord who has no beginning and who has no end. The Shiv Lingam is Sadashiva. And those who worship the Lord in that form, with sincerity, would have their prayers answered, can have the highest goal of human life, God realization. Swami Vivekanandaji, when he returned from the West, it was his desire to go and worship the Shiv Lingam, the natural Shiv Lingam at 𝗟𝗢𝗥𝗗𝗓. You know, in the 𝗟𝗢𝗥𝗓, during the extreme cold, the ice forms itself into a natural lingam. And tens of thousands of pilgrims will travel through treacherous terrain just to have darshan. And Swami Vivekananda, he was one of the pilgrims when he returned from the West. And in that 𝗟𝗢𝗥𝗓, he worshipped Lord Shiva. And there he had the most divine experience of his life, where he experienced God as the formless one. And that blessing remained with him for the rest of his life. Nandi, as I related some weeks ago, was destined to live for only 8 years. That young boy worshipped the Lingam of Lord Shiva with devotion, chanting Om Namah Shivaya. And moved to compassion, the Lord responded and blessed Nandi with immortality, making Nandi one of his, in fact, his chief Gana, his chief follower, as well as his Vahan, his vehicle. Kanapa, a great South Indian devotee, many hundreds of years ago, worshipped Lord Shiva in the Lingam form. And he attained the highest goal of human life, God realization. Suswara the hunter unconsciously worshipped the Lingam. Even an unconscious worship of the Shiv Lingam will bring benefit. And as a result of that worship, even though unconscious, even though unwitting, Suswara the hunter was transformed. He could no longer hunt. His cruel heart was changed into a heart of compassion. And when he was reborn as a king. And in that birth of a king, he developed great devotion for Lord Shiva. and he attained the highest goal of human life in that birth. So, Sri Ram dictated that the Shiv Lingam should be established at that spot, and at that spot he will give praise to God. So Sugriv, hearing the wish of the Lord, dispatched a number of messengers who invited and brought together all the great sages who installed the Shiv Lingam and worshipped it with due solemnity. Sri Ram said, "None is so dear to me as Shiva. There is no one dear to me as Lord Shiva," Sri Ram says. In this next chaupai, Tulsidas writes,
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama.
शिवद्रोही मम भगत कहावा, सोनर सपने हो मोहिना पावा। शिवद्रोही मम भगत कहावा, सोनर सपने हो मोहिना पावा।
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama.
शंकर विमुख भगति चाह मोरी, सोनार की मुरामटी टोरी। शंकर विमुख भगति चाह मोरी, सोनर की मुरामटी टोरी।
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama, 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 Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Rama.
Sri Ram continues, and he's saying this to the world, not only to those who were assembled there at that time, but to all those who would come after. And this is what the Lord said: "He who is opposed to Shiva and is called my worshipper can never dream of attaining to me. He who is opposed to Shankar and yet aspires after faith in me is doomed to perdition, stupid and dull-witted as he is." The Lord uses very strong words. And yet we see in contemporary times people speaking of Shiva as demigod. The Guru of Paramahansa Yogananda said, if Rama, Shiva, and by extension Krishna should come together, there would be perfect harmony, as they are different forms of the one God. However, if Vaishnavites and Shaivites and Shaktas, they come together, they would argue and they would fight who is greater. The Vaishnavite will say Vishnu is greater than Shiva. The Shaivite will say Shiva is greater. The Shaktas will say Divine Mother is greater. And those who worship the formless God, they will say, well, that is the only form of God, or that is the only aspect of God. God doesn't take form. So who is right? Sri Ramakrishna explained it this way. The Lord is formless. But we as human beings with form, how can we think of that formless God? It is not easy to think of the formless God. Very few souls can do that. Highly, highly advanced souls, great masters. Out of his compassion, that formless God takes the form that a devotee desires. Sri Ramakrishna says that steam has no form. But if you cool the steam, you condense the steam, it becomes water. It has a particular form. And if you put a water in an ice pan which is round, the ice that you get is round. If you put it in a square pan, the ice that you get is square. Can you say that the ice in the round pan and the ice in the square pan, they are different ice? Their essence is the same. They're composed of the same molecular structure, 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen in a V-shaped molecule. So the Lord, in his compassion, responds to us in whatever form we choose to worship him. Whether as Shiva, or as Vishnu, or as the Divine Mother, or in their formless state, it's the same God. The Master said that it is only people who are bigoted, people who do not understand reality, who fight over which form is superior to the other form. You know, one day, and our saints have a way of telling these stories to illustrate deep truths. So they tell us this story that there was this father who had 6 blind sons. And he assigned each one of them to bathe the elephant, a particular part to bathe. One was bathing the tail of the elephant, one was bathing the trunk of the elephant, one was bathing the ears of the elephant, one was bathing the legs of the elephant, and so on. And then after they finished, he asked them, what is bathing the elephant like? And the one bathing the tail said, well, the elephant is like a long piece of rope. The one bathing the ear said it is like a fan. The elephant is like a fan. The one bathing the legs of the elephant said it's like the trunk of a tree. And so on. Each one said a different thing. And each one started to argue with the other brothers that you're wrong and I am right. And then the father intervened finally and said, all of you are right and all of you are wrong. And they said, well, how can that be? And he said to them, each one of you described the part of the elephant you were bathing, but the elephant is much more than that. The elephant is the sum of all that you explained. So, it is the behavior of unenlightened people to argue about which form of God is greater than the other form. Those who have realized God, they know that it is the same God who dwells in all the different forms. Even Tulsidas and Mirabai had to be taught this lesson. Tulsidas believed in God only as Rama and Mirabai only as Krishna, and it is said they met. And Tulsidas desired for Mirabai to bow to Rama, but Mirabai would not bow to Rama. And Mirabai desired Tulsidas to bow to Krishna, but he would not bow to Krishna. So when Tulsi went to bow to Sri Ram, when he looked, he was not seeing Ram, he was seeing Krishna. And when Mirabai went to bow to Krishna, she was not seeing Krishna, she was seeing Ram. And then they both understood what God was trying to tell them, that there is no difference between Ram and Krishna. So that is why Sri Ram says, an enemy of Lord Shiva cannot be my devotee. He who is opposed to Shiva and is called my worshipper can never dream of attaining to me. He who is opposed to Shankar and yet aspires after faith in me is doomed to perdition, stupid and dull-witted as he is. In this next Chaupai, Tulsidas writes,
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
Jai Rameshwar darasano karihahi. Jai Rameshwar darasano karihahi. Te tanu taji mama lok sidarihahi. Te tanu taji mama lok sidarihahi.
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
जो गंगा जलो आनी चराई, जो गंगा जलो आनी चराई, सो सयुज्य मुक्ति नर पाई, सो सयुज्य मुक्ति नर पाई.
Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama. 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 Shri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Jai Rama.
Shri Ram says, those who make a pilgrimage to Rameshwar shall on quitting the body go direct to my realm, and he who brings the water of the Ganga and pours it on the Lord will attain liberation and be absorbed into my divine presence, my divine essence. There are some people that take these words literally, and that is okay. Rameshwar is also the place where Lord Sri Ram established the lingam of Lord Shiva. But these words are very deep. They're very symbolic. And they bespeak a great truth. This Rameshwar that Sri Ram is speaking of is an inner Rameshwar. Where is the lingam of Lord Shiva? In the body. We're told that it is at the highest chakra, the 𝗦𝗛𝗥𝗙 chakra, the highest chakra in the body. And Sri Ram is saying the one who can make a pilgrimage to this lingam, this Shiv Lingam, the one who can bring the water of the Ganga to pour it on the Lord within, will attain liberation. And the Ganga again is symbolic. It is the Kundalini Shakti, that inner current which lies dormant at the base of the spine, the 𝗦𝗛𝗥𝗙 chakra. If we can take that water to Rameshwar, taking that water up means that we have to awaken the Kundalini through our sadhana. That is awakened through our job, our meditation, our Siva. If we can awaken that power, and through meditation, deep scientific meditation, take it up the spine, through the different chakras, eventually taking it to the highest chakra to bathe that lingam there. That is the inner Ganga. That is how we take the water of the inner Ganga to Rameshwar. If we can do that, and it is not easy to do that, if we can bring that water of the Ganga to the Rameshwar at the 𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗔 chakra, in that state the yogi attains samadhi, union with God. So Sri Ram says, if the one who can do that will attain liberation and be absorbed in God's divine essence. Our Guru Maharaj, during his sadhana, he said that, Guru Maharaj did superhuman tapasya. And he recounted that 18 inches above his head, he could feel the fire, the heat from the fire, generated through his sadhana. Generated by the Kundalini rising up the spine. Sri Ramakrishna, when he used to go into samadhi, those who were with him, he would have on his dhoti but no upper garment. They will notice that his spine, the spinal cord will swell and move up. The swelling will move up as the Kundalini moved up his spine. And then he will go into spiritual trance. He will go into samadhi. So these great masters are showing us it is true. It is a great truth that power which is usually dormant in most human beings, those who are not spiritually bent, that power which is lying dormant, if we can awaken it through our meditation, through our job, through our seva. But we must balance seva with meditation. We can't do it by seva alone. We must also meditate. We must also do our job. Whether we know it or not, the purpose of job is to awaken that power. If we can awaken that power, and through our devotion, through our sadhana, we can take it to bathe the lingam at the highest chakra, then Sri Ram says, we will attain liberation. In this concluding doha, Tulsidas writes,
Bolo Ram, 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 Bolo Ram.
Shankara Priya Mama Drohi, Shiva Drohi Mama Dasa, Te Narakarahi Kalpa Bhari, Ghora Narakamahubasa.
Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram.
Shankara Priya Mama Drohi, Shiva Drohi Mama Dasa, Te Narakarahi Kalpa Bhari, Ghora Narakamahubasa.
Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Ram Ram, Bolo Ram, Ram Ram, Bolo Ram, Ram Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram, Bolo Ram.
Shankara Priya, those who are dear to Lord Shiva, Mama Drohi, but they are my enemies, Sri Ram is saying. Those who are devoted to Shankar and are hostile to me. Shiva Drohi, those who are enemies of Lord Shiva, Mama Dasa, but they call themselves servants of mine. Those who are opposed to Shiva but would fain be my servants shall have their abode in the deepest hell for a full eon. Sri Rama is saying, that those who worship Lord Shiva but criticize me, criticize Sri Ram, and those who worship Sri Ram but speak ill of Lord Shiva, the Lord is saying they will go to hell. In fact, they're already in hell by their hatred. Bhushundi in a previous birth was a devotee of Lord Shiva, but he hated Lord Vishnu so much. And that hatred made his life a dark one. The very Lord whom he worshipped, Lord Shiva, gave him srap, that he become a snake. His guru intervened and begged for him, and that srap, that curse, eventually became a blessing. Eventually, Bhushundi became a realized being. So, Sri Ram is saying, Tulsidas is saying, whatever form we worship, we must love that form and worship that form with all our devotion, but we must show respect to the other forms of God. If we can do that, we'll be fine. If, on the other hand, we show disrespect to the other forms of God, then our very hatred will cause us to be in hell. One day a man asked Paramahansa Yogananda, "Sir, do you believe in hell?" And that man was full of hatred. And the master replied, "Where do you think you are now?" We create our own heaven or our own hell by our positive or our negative thoughts. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and 𝗏𝗏𝗖, by banishing Sri Ram, they made their own hell. Their lives were filled with darkness from the moment they banished Sri Ram. They never knew happiness. On the other hand, there was a man who was dying in hospital, terminally ill. One nurse went to him. She took pity on him, and she was talking to him in such sweet tones, and he replied to her, "My dear sister, do not pity me. Even though I'm in pain, my mind is on God. The Lord has assured me that this is my final illness, and after I leave this body, after the suffering is over, I will be with him for eternity." And he was so filled with joy. Even though his body was racked with pain, he was filled with joy, with happiness. So dear ones, let us ponder on this message of Sri Ram, this message of Tulsidas, that it is the formless God who takes whatever form we love him in. The Lord is so kind, compassionate. If we say the formless can take form, then we're saying God is not all-powerful, that God cannot do something. But God can do anything. And it is God who takes whatever form is dear to us. It is the same formless God who assumes that form out of his love and his compassion for us. Let us worship that form of our choice with all our hearts, with all our love, with all our devotion. And by the grace of the divine, we will attain the goal of human life, which is God realization. May we all be so blessed. Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om.